Tony for the largest percentage of their life. I met him the day I was born. He was an early bird to the hospital, very much in my mother's face, I believe, the day I came on the scene. So Barb wrote this. She is not a public speaker, famously, but a public writer. So these are in Barb's words, with, I think, a beautiful capturing of Tony. So I met Tony in the mid-'80s when we were barely in our 30s and had our best lives ahead of us. He was lured to the Citizen Times via the Anderson Independent newspaper by his friend Ned Jennings. That was my dad. He was an editor at the ACT, launching Tony into a larger market that would lead to his storied career as an entertainment queen and kingmaker and eventually craft beer guru of the W&C region. For a couple of years, our late shift newspaper, radio, and TV colleagues would occasionally bring six-packs and cheap wine after work to Tony's dreadful digs at the infamous La Mancha Apartments on Riceville Road in OT. Cheers to La Mancha. The cross-media gatherings were fantastic. His apartment absolutely was not. When my daughter Casey arrived on the scene in '88, Tony was one of the first newspaper gang to show up in my hospital room less than 12 hours after her birth. 20-something years later, he gave her, then a college student, her first CT newspaper gig freelancing for the entertainment section. This possibly was the origin of his famous salutation, "Ciao." Can't be confirmed or denied. When Casey was a toddler, we moved to Richmond Avenue in West Asheville. The little house across the street went up for sale a few years later, and there was a big push from Tony's friends for him to buy it and escape La Mancha. He did, and he lived at 123 Richmond Avenue forevermore. So began our annual July and December joint across the street parties that continued for almost 25 years. Tony was in charge of a very impressive Cops Are Gonna Come level fireworks. And they should have had John Boyle's number. And a couple of times the cops did come, but it all worked out. And oh, how Tony loved being the producer of the Big Bang Boom. In the absence of blood family nearby, Tony surrounded himself with chosen family. And the network was vast. In addition to leading the charge elevating the craft beer industry, his stories in the Citizen Times boosted and sometimes launched the careers of countless musicians, actors, artists, writers, and myriad other creatives. Many also became his friends. One of them was Warren Haynes, an Asheville boy who would ascend to the big leagues of rock and roll. Tony was there enthusiastically promoting Warren in the late '80s when a relative unknown put on the first Warren Haynes Christmas Jam at 45 Cherry, a little nightclub on Cherry Street that was an oasis of music and fraternizing when downtown was essentially a ghost town. The Christmas Jam took off and quickly moved on to larger venues in the next few years, eventually landing at what's now the Harris Cherokee Center, Asheville. That will never feel right. For the next 3 decades until he left the newspaper, Tony continued championing the Jam, which featured both hungry local bands and national chart toppers, and many years sold out in a few hours after tickets went on sale. But Warren and other musicians didn't pocket the money from the shows. In the beginning, a few local nonprofits shared the proceeds. Ultimately, Warren formed a partnership with Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity, which became the sole recipient of the Jam revenues and also enjoyed Warren's personal and passionate involvement in the organization. So given Tony's long connection with Warren and the Jam, it seemed fitting that after his passing, his worldly belongings should be donated to Habitat to be sold at his restore and aid in its mission to provide pathways to ownership of decent and affordable housing. A couple of chosen family members carefully and respectfully went through the many items in Tony's house, calling the best and most likely to succeed for Habitat. Last week, a Habitat truck rolled up to 123 Richmond Avenue to collect Tony's best porch and house furniture, his Weber grill, his big old lamps, his electronics, and his other larger items. And the following day, 2 friends delivered 2 pickup truckloads of good quality housewares of all kinds, many still in unopened boxes, along with books, music, movies, art, and whimsical items that, combined with the larger ones, should add a nice sum to Habitat's coffers. This makes us happy, and we think Tony would be too. Yesterday, Warren emailed a remembrance of his longtime friend, saying Tony was a kind, sweet man, genuine and friendly, and always in a good mood with a smile for everyone he encountered. Tony did things his way. Many of his ways were delightful and endearing, some were insanely aggravating, and some caught up with him in the end. But for years, he was in this world before his health declined. He had a big, big life and touched a lot of other lives through both his colorful newspaper stories and his personal friendships. And aren't we grateful for all the times the Saints preserved us? Thanks to Tony. Cheers!
Oh, beautifully done.